Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations, and today is all about getting things prepped for fall. So you may be somebody who is getting ready for a little fall bazaar, fall market, maybe, turning over a booth or a shop, bringing some fall into it, or you're just looking to get started on some items for your home. And when you're ready to move the summer out, you need a couple of things to kind of freshen up the fall decor. So I'm getting some stuff ready for the shop, which is in that direction. And I just wanted to kind of show you some of the different items that I'm going to be putting together. And again, a lot of this for me is driven by what's sold in the past, giving you some good ideas. What are the items that I've thrifted that I need to put together? And we kind of go from there. So first things first, I've got lying on the ground a big mishmash of kind of fall colored decor that I've been thrifting, quite honestly, throughout the summer. I've got sprigs of items and stuff. So everything's kind of put together by thrifted things. I like to offer a lot of the decor items as inexpensively as possible in the store. I mean, yes, I have materials and supply costs and overhead because of the roof and things, but you have to be able to compete with people popping into Michael's or Canadian Tire here and buying some of their fall decor. So I also have this big bouquet. Some of the items are dead. They've seen better days. They need to go. So I need to pick this apart. This was another dump find. I tell you, this dump. So it's another dump find. I'm going to pull this apart, keep the little pieces off to the side that I want to reuse, get them cleaned up, and I'm saving the pot as well, which is beautiful, but I'm saving that for a Christmas thing, I think. So what I intend is I don't want to do things that are Halloweenish. I don't want to do things that are really Thanksgiving. So it's kind of fall neutral, if that makes sense, which means I'm not looking to use a lot of pumpkins in the coloring. I may consider things like this kind of pumpkin because it doesn't look very orangey pumpkin-y, if that makes sense. So I'm introducing fall, but I'm not introducing Halloween. And sometimes there's a bit of a fine line there, but it means that these decor items can carry you right through the entire fall season, right up to and including Thanksgiving, without feeling like they're out of place because now it was for Thanksgiving, now it was for Halloween. It's just fall, y'all. That's it. Yeah. I've got my florals sort of organized around me so that they're ready to go when I'm ready to go. But what I need to start with is painting out anything that needs painting. There's some items that don't need me to do anything, but there's some that do. So what I do have is this nice long cutting board. Now I'm gonna paint this one out in DIY, let me get this, cherry picked, which is kind of a non-traditional or unexpected fall color, but it's this deep, rich eggplant. Now, mine started to dry out, so I added water to start to soften it up. So what I am going to do is, off camera, spend more time stirring that. But let me just give you an idea of the rich tones of this. Kind of like that deep, rich Bing cherry, which is going to look great as a backdrop to those fall colors. So don't overlook some of these. You get these kind of rich tones in, some of your fall apples and fall vegetables, and even in some of the centers of some of your florals. So I'm gonna paint this one out in that color. I just need to do more stirring off camera. And then I also have this. It's gonna be kind of a marriage. It's gonna be a Frankenstein marriage. I am going to hot glue the base to this basket, and we're gonna do a floral display on that. And this kind of thing just makes really cool, much more interesting displays. Again, inexpensive purchases from the local thrift stores, and then you end up with something that looks ritzier, looks a little bit more expensive than it is. So don't overlook doing that, rather than everything being in just a traditional wreath or just in a pot, right? You can raise them up, do something different. So for this one, and again, well, way more paint than I need. We're gonna be putting that back in, but yeesh. Okay, I hate these. I started doing that, and then now I still have a few colors that are hanging out in there, but yuck. I just leave them in the containers now, guys. I don't find this a worthwhile expense. Mostly also because it's a lot of cleaning. Those are hard to clean, and I don't like having to do all that washing. I barely like washing my paintbrushes. So I am taking Summer Crush. Now there's also, in the DIY line, there's Fire Starter, which is a much brighter sort of, much brighter orange, which for some people will be more, you know, more appealing to them. It's more the pumpkin orange color. I love the soft muted tones of this. And we're gonna be adding a little bit of aging to it afterward. But I'm gonna get both these pieces painted up, 2 coats, before I glue them together, just because it's gonna make my life easier, you know, when you come to painting the base and stuff, that I'm not having to go around the pedestal. So I'm gonna get 2 coats on everything, and then we can come back for these ones. We can't get them all zhuzhed up with florals until we've got all of our painting done and gotten it dry. For this first project, what I have is just a galvanized metal container that I thrifted. You can find these readily, any shape. Dollar store has a bunch of them. Because it's so deep, I don't want to fill the whole thing with floral foam, so I just stuffed it with craft paper. I have a hunk of floral foam that I got from the dollar store, and I am just going to put a whack of hot glue on this. I just plugged in my glue gun, so it's a little stiff still. Just to kind of hold it in place, and we're gonna stick it on there. Now, what I am thinking is, and let me show you the inspiration for this and kind of where I'm going. Because I'm gonna have to get some moss and cover this before we start. But I thrifted a bag of these little pears. Look at those. So they're covered in like fake birch bark, right? It's like paper that looks like birch bark, and they're covered in those. And I love them. They're so neutral that we're gonna try and do something that's staying still fairly soft. So the first thing that I wanna do is I wanna grab a bunch of moss. So I have a bag of Spanish moss, which means, oh, I just tidied this area. It's gonna be all a mess again. You know what, I can't get ahead. It's just, so let me try and tease it a little bit in the package. But I definitely want to put some around the edging, spread that out a little bit. Oh, it's just such a mess. Down in the sides. It's just kind of automatically, just with the moss, starts looking great. All right, and now, okay, enough already. Oh my goodness. All right, so I want to start to kind of angle this around. Okay, I'm going to use the camera to start to cover up some of the green and just make it look like it's just a really full basket already. And doing this, and especially with the paper, because the paper is the most inexpensive component. So use more of it than of the other things that you need. And doing this moss gives us just a nice little base that's going to allow us to kind of hide a little bit what we've got happening there. And I still have a bit, oh Lord. You just end up with this stuff everywhere. All right, you can just go right back on there. Okay, so what I do have are some of these picks that I pulled out of that dump find. I have cleaned them off. So what I did do with everything was I took all the little picks and I dusted them first, then I hand wiped them with a wet cloth, and then I trimmed off any berries that weren't good anymore, or if leaves had fallen off and there was a stick going nowhere or a little stem, I trimmed that all off so that they all still looked new, right? That they all looked good and perfect, and we were ready to just use them again. So I like this kind of soft color with this. It gives a nice contrast to the kind of the creaminess of the pears, but we're not going into that full orange or full fall look. And I think that's going to work. I'm just trying to determine length here. So I want this a little shorter. Just kind of sticking on the sides, just these first guys. Just on either end. There we go. And I think what I might do is I might start putting some of my pears around just so that I can start adding other elements to it as I go. And I have as well this pick, which is just those same tones. I have a couple more of these, and I have this pick. And I think those are gonna be perfect. This one, dollar store. So again, you know, when you're doing, you know, some of your markets and things, the more that you can keep some of your price points at a reasonable level, the better the pricing that you're able to offer, the greater the likelihood people are going to buy, and the greater your profit by virtue of that. You know, you can sell one item at a really high price point or sell 10 items at a lower price point and make more money. So it's just a function of what's going to draw people into your booth, but as well for even some of your home decor items, right? You're not looking at necessarily wanting, as you're making things for your home, you don't necessarily want to be spending tons of money for each season. So all that I'm looking at doing right now is creating some balance. And I'm going to put some of these in exactly the same position, front and back, before I start adding a little bit more greenery again. Well, goldenry, it's not green. And building it up. So I'm going to continue just adding these same picks and that other sprig, those other big leaves that I showed you, and a couple more of the pears, and then we'll kind of see where we go. As much as I like it as it is, I do want to add a little bit more of a different textural element. So I have these little spirals. I don't even know what this is made of. Wicker, thin pieces of bamboo, I don't know. Anyway, they're just these little decorative spiral things that, again, I saw at the thrift store, and I snagged. So I am going to have to cut them off fairly short because I don't want them sticking out miles. So, and then kind of stick them into my design here and there, and you just kind of turn them until you get them to the height that you want. But I like that they are still in those kind of pale color tones, and they're not particularly heavy looking, right? That there's not, they're very thin, and so we can add texture in there and some movement without adding a lot of weight. Okay, I wanted him curling down. So yeah, I'm thinking I'm just gonna put a bunch of these in here, just here and there-ish. Again, they're very thin looking, so they're not adding tons, it's more subtle, but I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna look at it for a day and decide if it's done. And that's usually the best way for me, is just give it overnight. Now that our painted surfaces have had the night to dry, I'm moving on to the next steps with them. This one, great on this side, awful on this side, bleed through for whatever reason. So here's what I'm gonna do. I have a spray can of shellac. So I am going to there we go. I'm just gonna spray this, let it dry, and shellac is the ultimate stain blocker, right? So I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll paint another 1 or 2 coats of my cherry picked over top, and then I will sand it lightly and wax. So I got more steps with that than planned, but that's life. That's the way it goes. With this guy, I'm not planning on distressing it. What I do want to do though is tone down that color a little bit. So for that, what I am going to use is a little bit of Dark and Decrepit. Rather than putting it flat on this, because there's no way you're really going to be able to rub that back to any major degree, I'm going to create, yeah, just figures. Okay, I'm going to create a bit of a wash with it. So I'm going to add, that's maybe about 1 tablespoon. And I am going to, okay, this just doesn't even want to go on even. There we go. All right. And again, that's what pants are for. And because I don't want it to not be sealed, I'm going to add maybe about a teaspoon or 2, not quite a tablespoon. And I'm going to further dilute it with Tough Coat Sealer. So here's the thing, this isn't sealed. I could seal it and then do my Dark and Decrepit, but Dark and Decrepit is a sealer. The only difference here is that because of the amount of water that I added in, I am diluting the seal. Does that make sense? So you could add a little bit of water, but not a lot. So instead of just using water to dilute it, I'm using a clear top coat. You could use a clear top coat of your choice. I happen to have this one open. So there's nothing wrong with combining product lines, guys, right? So weird thread of goop from the lid. Okay, so I want this kind of watery. And I'm gonna go to the bottom first. Yeah, see how transparent this is? That's because we watered it down, and that's what I want. I'm gonna try wiping it back and see what that looks like, but I don't mind the look of it not wiped back. So if I don't like the wipe back, oh no, that's great. So you can see that it kind of darkens. Now it's gonna darken the orange anyway, because this is unsealed, but you can see it sitting in the crevices. It's kind of drifting over the top. It sort of antiques it. And any of this that I have left over in my cup, I will put into a small jar and I will keep. So it's almost like we're creating our own soft antiquing glaze, right? And don't think that you can't do that, right? Don't think that you can't kind of add some products together. You just have to keep in mind, I still wanted to maintain its sealing properties, so that's why I elected to add some of the top coat to dilute it and not just water, so that this item would still be sealed when all was said and done. While everything else is drying still, let's carry on. Our next project is this guy. Now, I thrifted this. I love the kind of rusted patina on it. The bottom is kind of rough and crinkly from some kind of spray adhesive, it feels like. I don't care because we're gonna fill that part. But a little dollar store candle fits in there just perfect. So that's what we're gonna be putting there. What I want to do is zhuzh up the candle a little bit first. It's got this label Scotch taped on. Kind of weird. All right, perfect. So here's what we're gonna do. Let me grab a clear wax brush. So the first thing that I have here is I have a little bit of green tissue paper. Now this is perhaps a little bit more substantial. You could do this with a napkin. I just have this kind of mottled green and I'm kind of digging it. What I like to do is I take my wax. A lot of these furniture waxes have beeswax as a base. You could use a straight beeswax, which I would. I have it on the shelf, but it's not opened, and so I'm waiting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wax up my candle. You could do the same method by ironing on your napkin or your tissue paper, right? So kind of rolling, oh, get my rough edge up top. And then I'm just going to try and do this evenly. And I'm going to wrap it around my candle, and then I'm going to apply more wax to seal. And it actually kind of makes it all sticky. Once it's all kind of on there, it kind of makes it adhere onto your candle, which is cool. And this wax will dry out in the air. So I'm just gonna do a coat or two and have my candle all dressed, and it just looks a little bit more interesting inside. Because I'm not doing all of this as, you know, totally pumpkin-y or, you know, Halloween-y, that sort of thing. I didn't want to use any of the really decorative napkins that were at the dollar store, but this was kind of the perfect look. The first thing that I want to do is I want to get some of this messy. I love the look, I just hate the mess. So I want to get some of this messy Spanish moss. Oh, I just swept. Glued down to my base, which kind of serves as the filler there, right? So let me get a start on it. Okay. And then it's just a matter of taking whatever little picks that you might have, any little, you know, kind of fall florals, and start adding them in. You don't want them too high. So this one's a little bit higher than I want. But I do want to start adding them around my base. So I'll put some taller ones around the back, and then I'll fill in with a few little short ones, because I'm kind of gluing these downward and not against anything. I don't want a lot of the glue to show against the base of my candle. I am gonna hold it for a while. So I've got some of these picks that I will do. And I like to just kind of vary the height a little bit of some of the same items, just so that they're not exactly the same height, which works perfect for me because I'm not a very exacting kind of gal. So let me get these guys around, and I'll dig out some of the other items that I wanted to include in this one, and I'll show you kind of the layout. So this is where we're at so far. And you can see them trying to keep it fairly neutral. I'm trying to keep different textures in there. So what I do have are these pussy willow strands. Now these were all wrapped together in a bundle, came from one of the groupings that I had from the dollar store. And there aren't tons. So I think that it would be perfect for this project because I'm not going to need tons. I'm just going to need some. But they are on a heavy duty wire. And what I need to do is to break them down. So break the twigs down into smaller segments, right? So that I have a lot of them as opposed to just a couple. I can also nestle in there. They're in the same color tones, right? Same color tones, but adding another textural element. And that's what I'm looking for right now before I start looking for what's going to be lower. So these I have cut a little bit shorter, so I'm slowly going down in height. Well, maybe not that guy. He's a little taller. Now that I've got all of those taller stems going around the circumference, what I want to do is just kind of ground cover. So I do have from the dump find these little picks, and they actually are just little segments of florals that have been just added onto a quick little loop of florist wire. So instead of using them at their height, I'm going to start to tuck them in around the base so that we get color being anchored down there and we get a little bit of that ground cover happening. And then that's it for this. It doesn't need much more. So we're just looking at having, you know, a little bit of that happening in front like this to add some color, and keeping it nice and loose, nice and light. And then this one's done. Now that our little pot is dried, it's time to start working on this. Now, one of the things that I do when I'm looking to put together an arrangement is I pull together kind of a floral bundle, right? So I pull together, gee, these are all the components that I think would work together. I may not use all of them, but it helps me at least be sort of organized about do I have enough in the color family? Do I have enough items that would be able to complete this project? And, you know, it just kind of keeps me on track. And if you saw the huge stack of fall-inspired items sitting over there, you'd understand why it becomes necessary. I don't want to start sticking something in and need 3 more to realize I don't have 3 more. So I like to kind of lay them out, and you can see I'm just kind of even organizing them around my workspace a little bit here so that I have my like items grouped together, and then I can get started. Now, I have the foam, so I don't anticipate the need to do a lot of gluing, but you also never know. So what I am thinking is kind of main items is starting with this big flower. I've got a couple of others around to go in. I like these for adding some texture and some height. So I just really need to decide how tall I want this. I don't want it massive, right? Like I don't want sticking way up there. That's kind of not in keeping with the size. But I think this is one of the taller items is, this is always, for some of these, whoosh, it's a good hand gripping exercise, that's for sure. Okay, now this one, I think I'm gonna need, the center of this is really worn. So I'm just gonna put a bit of glue in there for this particular flower, just because I don't really have anything to hold it up, and I'm discovering the foam only goes down 1 inch. It was deceptive. It looked like it would be there forever. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick a little bit of moss around. So I'll do that while this is drying. I don't anticipate needing tons of this, and mostly just around the edge. Okay, so with this flower, I am going to take these other smaller florals, and I do have a couple more than 3, but I'm going to put them in because then I can kind of fit some of my other leaves and picks and things around them. So I'm just kind of trying to do like a little triad here, sort of, you know, get them sort of equidistant from each other around there and go from there. I like these guys a lot. And these ones, this big flower was from that big bouquet from the dump. These were from that same arrangement as well. Such a good little find. Once you get kind of an idea of where you're going, and once you get them cleaned up, then, you know, you can't beat the price point, because these florals can get really crazy expensive. You know, if you're buying them from a place like a craft store like Michael's, there is a warehouse not too far from here that does sell discounted items. So like not discounted items, but like craft items at like a wholesale price. So I am due to maybe hit them up for some fall decor, but I wanted to make use of the dump find and last year's inventory and stash, because sometimes I don't need to have all the things. So these leaves, I have 2. I have the rounded and the spiky. I'm thinking I'm starting with some of these spiky ones up closer to the center, because just the formation of them being the long and spiky means that they visually kind of give a little bit more height, right? That they just, because of the long nature of them. And I'll put the rounded ones closer toward the front. So what I have in reserve, I have these leaves and I have some maple leaves that I did a little smaller, and that are, these ones are in more muted tones. You know, I've got some that are in much more bright colors, but I'm again not looking for it to be too pumpkin-y, and this is already fairly bright. I have some small little flowers that I will use, and I'm reserving some of the wheat stalks for after I've got some of this together to see where I need some filler. So I'm just going to continue adding these out. So I will go from these next around, and then these, right, toward the end. Then I'll see if I'm going to add some flowers, and I'll pop these in last, the little wheat stalks, if I need some height or maybe a little bit of a color distinction, color break, because they're more in the cream. And then we got this one done. So these ones have, these picks aren't very full, right? They don't have tons and tons of leaves on them. That one has none. So we're just going to be looking at adding in, you know, a couple here and there, adding in a little bit of volume. And I just have to make sure that as I go, whether I need to, because this doesn't go down all the way, whether I need to take off a little bit of height. Now, for our board that we had painted in that beautiful cherry picked, what I want to do is kind of lay out florals going down the board. So I'm thinking that I will start with these. I don't like that big hunk of plastic hanging there, but maybe we won't see that. So I am thinking these to start with, that they will lie fairly low, right? And ultimately, we'll have this big flower. If those guys go on either side, we'll have this big flower here. Now, what I do want, I am going to want it glued down so that it faces up, right? And then I will just use some leaves and some other little fall-inspired berries to kind of fill it in and get that sort of hanging like this. And then we'll look at tying it off. So when we do this, we have to build from the bottom up. Here's where I can start gluing. Now this glue at the top, we aren't going to see, right? We're gonna have that covered with other florals. We're gonna have it covered with, I don't know if it's gonna be rope or it's gonna be ribbon, but we aren't gonna see that. So I'm not worried about it. The flower, I'm thinking I am going to cut off of this because I want it facing upright, and it's going to be easier if I'm not contending with the big stem. The fewer stems I have to worry about, probably the better in my life. So we're gonna get a honking amount of glue on here. Put it right in about there. And now I'm just gonna hold these three in place while I start arranging my other items. So the berries are gonna be next, and the last thing will be the leaves. I'm gonna get those all in place, and then we'll come back to take a look at finishing it off. There is a lot happening on this little board. So I don't want to do a big colorful ribbon. It just needs something simple to kind of cover over a little bit of the glue in the stems and just finish it off. So I am just taking this plain silk one, and what I am going to do is wrap it around my base first, although just a little more centered. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it around my base first. Try that again. Okay, and then I'm gonna tie it. And then I can focus on my bow without worrying about slippage, right? So just a nice, simple little bow. I still do rabbit ears. Go figure, that's just, I don't know why I never got the hang of that wrap around thing, but I didn't. So there you go. Okay. And then once you have this how you like it, tie off the tails, and then this one's done. Let's take a look at our finished little fall decor ideas. Now, one of the things that I tried to do is give you a look at different shapes and different bases and therefore kind of different looks and things that can just fit in almost anywhere. If you're looking to decorate up your home, then that variation makes it a little bit more interesting. If you are selling in a booth or at a market, then having some fall-inspired florals that are on different bases and different shapes gives a lot more flexibility to the buyer. So the first one we did was this bucket of pears, and we kept it fairly neutral. I really love having those little spirals. I just, they're light, they don't add a lot of color, but they add kind of this interesting element to it that just kind of perks it up a little bit. But this is pretty neutral in somebody's home. It's not the bright oranges that we used on some of the other elements. And I think it's my favorite. I love those pears. That was such a cool find. And you could replace it with any kind of plastic fruits. Let me put that down so we have space that you paint out. You could paint them into cream. And I've taken all kinds of plastic fruit that I found and I painted them all white and put them into a blue bowl, and it looks awesome. But you can do the same thing for some of those kinds of arrangements. Don't get locked into not having exactly what I have. Use this as inspiration and kind of kickstart it. The next project was just doing this little lantern. I really liked the green wrap around this so that this just stays very wildflower. I really wanted it just kind of loose, not all compacted, and just nice and tall, and it's just kind of a totally different but cute little decor piece. We did, because it's next in my way, we did the long breadboard, which again, I just thrifted breadboards and cutting boards, things like that. I'm just trying to work off a little strand of glue back here. Are pretty easy to find in the thrift stores. I had tied the bow and then it just wasn't big enough. So I took an extra loop of the ribbon, glued it together into a round and tucked it in the middle so it looked like I did a triple bow, which I could have done, but you know, I just didn't, and it was already tied and this worked. So it hides it. Looks like I knew what I was doing. So again, it's got the loop. I'll attach a little bit of rope. It can hang on a wall. It can hang on a door, whatever works. It can just as easily lean up on the top of a buffet or credenza and against the wall. The other one was that marriage, where we took that candlestick, we glued it to a little thrifted pot, and we used it as a basis for our arrangement. And got the big yellow one on top. And again, this is just kind of raising it up using a pedestal. So, you know, if you have any kind of a pedestal already that you can use as a basis for a pot, you don't have to glue them together. This just makes it easier for a purchase for someone, and for someone who's not able to visualize it raised. But again, we're giving different heights and different textures and different looks. And again, in keeping with, you know, we're not into pumpkins yet, so these are reminiscent of some of the flowers that people have pots out on their front porches and things. It kind of starts bringing fall in without going full on Halloween or Thanksgiving or anything like that. very easy later to be able to add in some little mini pumpkins if you wanted. Let me know what you think of these ones, guys. I hope it just kind of inspires you to try doing some fall decor using different bases, different items, and just starting to slowly add in some of that decor and getting your house all fall ready or your booths fall ready. Look forward to seeing you on the next one. And until then, take care.